Okay, hey peeps, welcome to the fifth episode of the Work with What You Got podcast. My name is Devin, aka Dina Chaitanya, and I have a beautiful guest here today called Lalita Gopika. She runs a Instagram page, and is it just Instagram or Facebook and TikTok and
Instagram and Facebook and my website. I think that's enough, right?
Well, I mean, the world is advancing every day. So, oh yeah,
That's
so
all I can
so
keep up with.
Lolita runs a business called Atma Your Healing Journey. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And she runs pages that are connected to her business. So she runs an Instagram page, she runs a Facebook page, and she has a website that links to her personal business that she runs, Atma Your Healing Journey. And Lolita is a trauma-informed coach, a spiritual coach, a trauma-informed coach. So I wondered maybe you could just inform us, what does that mean? Like, what do you do in everyday life? And yeah, we can start there.
Sure. So I think as I was explaining to you just before, it's a 6-month program. So the first 3 months is focused on emotional mastery, and
Mm.
then the last 3 months is focused on like divine alignment, whatever that means to the individual client. So yeah, it's really for sensitive or empath, people who identify as empaths or highly sensitive women that are wanting to just take a little bit more control of their emotional world instead of having them feel so overwhelming and all-consuming. And for me personally, there always needs to be an element of spirituality within that. There needs to be both, emotion and discovery of our emotional world because we're sentient beings, but also the spiritual one kind of can't be without the other. And most empaths are really aligned and understand that intuitively already from, I want to say from birth, but from a young age, it's usually there's that connection there. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking that a lot of the time when we get into a field where we're teaching about something, we must have had some sort of experience. So when you say you're trying to coach and help women who are empaths, then I'm assuming that you must be one yourself. Otherwise, like how are you in the same field? So what does an empath mean to you? What is it? What has your experience been like being an empath?
Yeah, so good question. Yes, I am an empath. I generally try and, steer away from any sort of labels, but
Yeah,
I do find, yeah, it's
it's
just I
very
find
commonly
it's
used. Yeah.
and I just find them to be they can be unhealthy anyway because it's such a
Mm,
thing
mm, mm.
in modern day and
You
oh,
can
I've
make
got
it like your
80.
identity, right? And then you just
Yeah.
filter everything
And then
through that identity. Yeah, yeah, I see what you
yes, and then it stops us. It can kind of limit us and really stops our evolution, our spiritual
mean.
evolution, our growth. And yeah, so anyway, but you've asked me that, and so yes, I do
Mm,
identify with that, and I just find it's the easiest way to reach the hearts of those that I just want to serve and I want to connect with because I've suffered so much in my upbringing, and I suffered even in my, adolescence and in adulthood as well. And it's just, yeah, there's so much support and there's answers, there's education, and I just want to be a part of, the encouragement, empowerment, and inspiration for that. So yeah, I guess, for me, it just means someone who has some understanding of what spirituality means for them, or that there is something higher than themselves, um, and that they've gone through a really hard time. They've likely gone through a really tough time in their adolescence, and they've had to likely be the parent to their parents emotionally. They've had to really read between the lines with
mm,
everything, walk on eggshells around others, be there for others, constantly shift their who they are, their very being, just to please everyone else around them. That's usually, and that can create such disconnect in our adult life and stop us from having healthy, loving relationships, not just with others, but with divinity as well. So again, that spiritual
mm.
evolution. Yeah.
So there's a few points I'm going to touch on, but the first one is that obviously the way that we're conditioned as a child is going to affect all of our relationships as we grow older. I mean, that even translates into having a relationship with the divine, or God or Krishna or however you refer to, the
Yeah,
higher
because
power
it's
that
what
they.
we make things mean.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, our parent was, would come home and they just couldn't be present for us. So we could make that mean, okay, I'm abandoned, I'm alone, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not loved. There's so many things that we can make that mean. And then, yeah, we're bringing that into everything. And depending on how, like when that was created, it's going to shift. So there's going to be layers on top of layers on top of layers the
Mm.
longer it's been there. So it's that the more into the subconscious or even the unconscious it will be. So
So
yeah,
so
it's
so so we're what how I view it, and what I'm also asking a question at the same time, is that you're saying that we're needing to undo all those layers that we were taught, that we were taught how to act in a certain way, and those layers may be stopping us from progressing in life. They may stop us from progressing in our spiritual life as well, in our connection with the divine and the world around us, and with a deeper relationship with ourselves. So what we're trying to do, I'm assuming you're trying to do, is help people to undo all of those and bring the real version of themselves through.
I like to use the word transform and bring into the light, because undo kind of denotes that there's something wrong with us, or that there's
Okay.
something wrong to begin with. And that's, usually, I'm imperfect, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And that kind of, so it's rather accepting what's there
Mm.
and transforming it, because without really seeing or hearing the stories and seeing the patterns first and just being with that, we can't actually transform it. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. So it starts with acceptance, basically. Accepting that
Yeah.
all these
And
things that make me who I am right now, it's not like there's anything wrong with it, but it's not
yes.
really helping me at the moment. It
Yeah.
helped
It's
me
not
then.
giving me what I
Yeah,
want.
it helped me then, but it's not helping me now.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Spot on. So I think we're meaning the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just, again,
Yeah,
that
the
language.
words. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so
I
there's
love
I mean I
language. Yeah.
mean I'm also quite aware that, the way that we phrase things can trap us in a certain, way of thinking or whatever. But I mean, no one's perfect. So anyway, at the end of the day, we're on the same
Yeah.
page.
Oh, absolutely. And it's how, someone may not react to that. Usually an empath woman probably would,
Sure.
because there's such a level of subtleties and sensitivity there. But
Sure.
yeah, people may not make it mean that. So yeah, but we're totally on the same page. Yes.
So like I like what you were saying about being an empath, and how a label can become an identity, and that can become unhealthy. So
Yeah.
would you prefer to say, or would you prefer to view people, all of us, as being sensitive, in some way or another? Because when we really connect to the spiritual side of ourselves, we should
Yeah.
be becoming sensitive to things.
Yes.
So in other
Yes.
words, we all have the capacity to be empathetic or an empath to some degree, but just there's like varying degrees to which everybody has that, depending on
Well,
who
that
you
would
are.
be healthy empathy. Like if you're coming from a secure environment in your upbringing, absolutely, you can already be in that mode of goodness and then connect with those spiritual principles and just open up that your heart and open up that empathy. But what happens for empaths and that those trauma filters is we're making it often mean that we can never trust anyone,
Uh,
and that we're always going to be abandoned, and we're always going to be alone, and we're always going to be unloved, and we're always going to be unworthy. Those are usually, I think 5 or 6 core wounds there, which is
mhm.
usually the main why we struggle so much in dealing with the outside world, or dealing with other people, or even with our own mind or own consciousness. But that's where, it comes into that healthy empathy. So you're starting to spiritualize your emotional world. You know, there's mastery and then spiritualizing it. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm really glad you said that. So is there a particular reason why you've chosen just to work with women and not with men as well?
Um, it's just something that men are, their consciousness is different. How they process things is very, very different. And so it's like an extra step for me.
Mm,
So at this point, I think until I, you know, further my own education and my own experience in working with others, that's where I feel most comfortable. And then, you know, in time, yes, for sure, that could be a possibility. But for men, like for women, we really struggle with, you know, if we're just looking at it with Maya or the illusory energy, right? Basically, illusion means fear.
mm.
So we are all showing up to deal with fear in different ways. So for women, you know, there's often so much grief and so much, yeah, just frustration, grief in the loss of having to like constantly, you know, meet our basic needs, right? So that's the level that we're dealing with, and that's kind of how our exchange with our external environment. But for men, it's this battling, you know, with, or this fear of failure, or yeah, it's the consciousness, the
Yeah,
psychology is
it's
different. Anyway,
different
I'm sure
roles,
you
right?
understand
And
that.
yeah, different roles, and different roles have different like effects on the person. So men
Yes.
have a different sort of uh given placement in the world. Not that all of us follow it, but there's like but like nature's design, men were designed to do specific things. So there's specific pitfalls that come with those things if you're not wary, you know, or you're not aware enough, or you don't have the right assistance or guidance. And then women have different ones because women were designed to do different things by nature. Okay, so I see what
Yes.
you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's just how they show up to deal, like
Mm,
even just psychologically, it's not even the roles that we have, like it, you know, the physical roles, it's just how we kind of show up. And I just feel like men, you know, need to have support of other men. It's really,
mm.
really, really
I
important for
also
them.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
at this, yeah, I just think that there's not enough of that. I'm fortunate to know a couple that do really support men and becoming more vulnerable. And I just feel like that needs to come from men.
Mm,
However, there could be a really prevalent mother wound there that
mhm.
needs that support of a secure woman in a coaching or counseling role. That's fantastic. But as a rule, I just feel like man needs the support of other men. It's just, yeah, I think it's a huge, huge need today.
I
Huge.
agree. And I've always
Yeah.
thought that um, everybody, like in today's day and age, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, is that everybody's trying to become a leader. So that includes men and women. We're all trying to lead each other. But in my
Yeah.
opinion, I think men should lead men and women should lead women. And then we should converse with each other and see where we can meet
Yes.
and help each other. But I don't
Yeah.
think that women should be essentially leading men. And I don't think men
Yeah.
should essentially be teaching. Well, by leading, I mean teaching how to be. So I don't think women should be teaching
Yeah.
men how to be men, and I don't think men should be teaching women
Absolutely.
how to be women. I think that
Yeah.
women should have strong leadership, or
Yeah.
strong women in leadership who can show other women how to be
Yes.
good women,
Yes.
to in a general sense. And then
Yeah.
that the woman should meet men in a way that works with what you like, your partner or your
Yeah.
husband or whatever.
Yeah.
Or yeah, so that's
Yes.
always how I've seen it, at least
Me
as I've
too.
progressed in
Yeah.
my life and my spiritual journey, because I think that
Yeah.
for a woman to tell a man how to be a man, it's going to come across a very, I've seen it a lot. I've seen it in videos.
Yeah.
I've seen it's just different. Women and men are just different. Your whole emotional chemical makeup is just different from a man, and
Yes.
a man's is
It's so
different from a woman.
different. And
So
I feel like I can't relate.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
my, you know, my whole superpower in my coaching is being able to relate, being able to empathize. And I
Sure.
just feel like I can only do that so
So much.
much
Yeah, yeah.
with
And
men.
I mean,
Like
you
it's
could you
just,
could
yeah.
learn how to. You could. There's no. You. It's not like you can't learn how to. But
Yeah.
at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like if men can step up and do that for men, then there's no need for the woman to do it. if that makes sense.
Well, it's just, again, it just comes to that specific need. Like, you know, if you're looking at there's, I think, 5 different types of mother wound. I can't for the life of me remember exactly what they are, but there are
Sure.
5
Yeah,
types of
yeah,
different
yeah.
mother wound,
We'll
right?
another
So
podcast,
that,
yes.
yeah, we can get to that another
Yeah.
time. But you know, that could be necessary. But you're right, it's that example. And if we're looking, you know, at the Bhakti teachings, which, you know, I think for both of us, it's a strong foundation there. Yeah, if we're looking at that, we need that example and that association, right, of someone who's more qualified than us and can show us. It's that example, because if we didn't have that growing up, that's all we have to lean against, you know? And yeah, you're right. Like, a woman can't show a man how to be a man. It's just not possible. It's a
I
really
mean,
good
I'm not
point.
saying I'm not, because I mean, I'm just not, as you're saying that, I'm thinking there's some single mothers out there that are like, I disagree, you know, because I'm showing my son how to be a son, and I don't, I respect women who are trying to do that. And what I would say, just what I've always said and how I think about these things, is that if you're a single mother and you're trying to show your son how to be a man, get positive male influences for your son in his life.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
send him to some martial arts, teach him, send him to someone who's spiritual, that's a male figure, you know, who can teach him some spiritual
Yeah.
things on from a male's perspective. I wouldn't I think that the world is forcing men and women to be super independent in today's day and age, and specifically on
Yes.
the women's side of things. And I think
Yeah.
it's not letting women rely on men too much because
Well,
of,
this is
yeah,
where the interdependence, right,
yeah,
comes into play, because, yeah, it's hyper independence,
mm,
because it's, again, most women are fearful avoidance. You know, and that's what usually empaths are dealing with. And that means the really
you mean
prominent
by
core
empathetic
wound,
woman, right?
empath women,
Yeah,
yes,
they're
empath women
dealing with
specifically.
fearful avoidance.
It's a attachment style. So you've
Mm,
got,
mm,
you know, secure, anxious, and you've got fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant, right?
uh,
So yeah, so most women will, empath women will be fearful avoidant. They will go on that borderline. So what that usually means is massive amounts of trust issues. Yeah. So it's not that, and you're right, society, 100 million%. It's like, yes, independent, be independent, because it's all from that fear-based, I
yes,
can't trust. And
yes.
there's so much generations and generations, right, backing that
Yeah,
up.
of
But it
like,
doesn't mean
you
that's
shouldn't
right.
trust men. Look at how bad men have been. And like, I do agree. I think that there has been some terrible misinterpretations of what masculinity can be and can do for the world, because people are
Yeah.
confused. There's so much,
Yeah.
there's a lack of like a healthy tradition and culture in the world, that there's no
Yeah.
wonder that there's a misrepresentation of what it means to be a good woman and a good man in today's day and age.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
yeah, I mean, I always say again that I think specifically in the West that there is a big lack of culture in the West. And what I mean by that is I don't mean there isn't culture.
We
I just
have
mean,
culture in the West. Just,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think you just
exactly.
maybe have a little bit more than us Aussies, but yeah, we
No, I
definitely
don't
don't.
even think so. Like
Definitely don't.
for a
Mm.
white man, a white male, just from my own experience, there's literally no culture. There's only made up things. Like for instance, I don't know if you do this in Australia as well, but when you turn 21, you're supposed to get like a big key for your birthday. And
Oh my
what
God.
does that mean? The key doesn't even open anything.
What does that mean?
I did
What is
say
it
I
supposed to
don't
mean?
know. It's supposed to be like the
Okay.
key to your future, but there's like, wow, you gave me a key. I didn't go through any sort of process of taking on responsibility. I
Right.
haven't gone
There's no
through any process.
initiation.
There's been
There's no
no
ritual.
initiation process.
Yeah. There's
And
no
there's,
samskara.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And I don't think there's anything for women either. I mean, I can't say, I'm just from my perspective. I've just
definitely.
seen in my
Definitely. Well,
friends
in
and
my
myself.
experience, no.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what I mean by there's a big lack of culture in the West. Like if you look at all traditions,
Yeah.
and now I like to refer, I mean, we have our tradition, our Bhakti tradition, but if I used to
Yeah.
use the tradition of like the Native Americans. So
Beautiful.
when they were growing up and they were reaching that point of becoming a man, they would be
Yes.
sent into the wild for a
Yes.
few days, a week, 2 weeks, or until they could provide for themselves, hunt for themselves, make shelter
Yep.
for themselves. And only when they could do all of that, then they could come back into the tribe. And they had to
Into
do
the
it by themselves in the wild, like
yeah.
wild animals, elements, all of that stuff. And they
Yeah.
had to learn and take responsibility for themselves. And then only once they did that, they could come back and be reintegrated into the tribe. And
Yes.
that was the initiation process, or at least a part of the initiation process. And
Absolutely.
those basic elements are just gone in.
Yeah, nothing means anything anymore. There's no meaning that we give it. It's just like everyone's just suffering so much. So it's just we're trying to get through. We're just in survival mode.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's so important, to connect with some spiritual principles in your life so that okay, whatever is coming into my life, this is part of my spiritual evolution. Or how is this connected with my spiritual evolution? We've got some, internal framework that we can come back to, so we make it mean something. But you're right, you're absolutely spot on. And I think that's where we as a society, we get so lost. And that's again why I so love what I do, because it's helping women specifically to create that internal framework and have something to come back to, so that even if they do get trapped into a narcissistic or codependent or toxic relationship, within friendships or in romantic relationships, then they can have that framework to come back to and know their evolution. Because it's like we're just so far off the Richter scale. We
We've
can't come
wandered
back
too
to.
far off the
Yeah.
designated path.
Yeah, so I think this is what we can do, help, individually each person to transform and not get sucked into that, and connect with themselves and their own internal framework. But yeah, it's really, really good point. Absolutely.
I like where you're going with it. And by framework, my thought is that you mean bringing or structuring a set of values and morals, like material ones and then spiritual ones. And you're providing that for women, right? You're providing like a framework of developing a healthy sense of independence, a healthy set of values and morals on a material platform and a spiritual platform, so that the woman is set for whatever comes her way, basically. Is that what you were saying?
Yes,
Or yeah.
you're right. I mean, in essence, yes, it is, values and morals, but it's actually more of a check-in system. Like
Okay.
it's more in the microcosm. Like definitely the macrocosm would be, yeah, morals and values that are more in alignment with at least goodness and hopefully, spiritual connection. But yeah, it's more of a check-in. So creating a system for your lower self needs and your higher self needs. So because they're two completely separate systems.
Yeah.
And to know what to watch out for, if you're going into your lower self, and how to understand what those needs are, meet those needs, and connecting it in with the higher self. So when you do go into those places that are dark and lonely, and another level of that, that trauma is coming up, or that wound is coming up to be healed, then you've got something there to feel connected, to feel like you're not alone.
I like what you were saying about teaching women to have a healthy sense of independence, because I think the issue that a lot of women in the past faced was that they weren't given or taught how to be healthy. They weren't taught how to have a healthy sense of self-esteem and a healthy sense of self-confidence. It was basically, in that sense, I think that there it was a bit more male dominated. So the man in a relationship got to dictate a lot, even if the man wasn't a healthy representation of what it means to be a husband or a leader or a guide. And then the man just got to have a blanket saying over everything. And that's where women maybe had a bit of a drawback in the past. And so, in
Yeah.
my opinion, it's definitely a good thing that women develop and learn to have a healthy sense
Yeah.
of self-confidence, a healthy sense of self-esteem,
Yeah.
a healthy sense of independence, so that you can learn to identify what what is not a good relationship, what isn't a healthy form of love, so that you can address it in a healthy way. And that's
Yeah,
where I see that's what I see that from my perspective, that's what I would like to see women teaching women how to do, you know,
absolutely.
is to
Yeah,
have people,
absolutely.
women going into that field, learning themselves, which I imagine you're obviously doing as you're teaching and as you're
Trying.
practicing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I mean, it's self-worth is, it's something no one is born with, confidence or self-esteem or self-worth. No one. It doesn't matter how good your family is or, what you're born into. You have to earn it. It is something you have to earn at every moment of every day by continually reinforcing, actions with your values. And it's, yeah, we just veer away from that because we just don't have an environment that's really supports that. We have to be so strong, particularly in the beginning, and particularly if there is a lot of trauma. And I liked your points about how the man kind of had that blanket statement and that's kind of how it was. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's only in the last 50 years that we've actually created a language to describe and express our emotions. Like, it's actually become a cultural shift, right? It's only in the last 50 years. So it's so new, right? It's so new. Of course, now people are starting to, lean a little bit too much into the emotion and identify with it and the labels and everything.
yeah,
And that's what we were talking about before, going too much into that.
the
And
hyper
that's,
independent space where now it's just like,
yes,
but not even just hyper independence, but it's just too much free flow, if that makes sense. So a woman's natural capacity, in my opinion, and from what I studied and what I've read and just how I see things, is that women are more naturally inclined to be more free flow, more creative, more spontaneous. That's like
yeah,
the more
the
like
mystery.
feminine energy. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so what I've seen in our society is that we've lost touch with that healthy masculinity that keeps us grounded and has a structure and a
Yeah,
framework, and that now
yeah,
we've gone way too much into that I'm just going to do what I feel all the time, which is not a bad thing if it's done in the right circumstance, the right place, and the right time. But to just
it's
solely base
about,
everything on that, that's where we're
yes,
a
that's
bit too
exactly right.
chaotic.
It's like
Yeah.
you're making excuses because of the
How I
limitations that
feel.
the
Yeah.
wound, exactly, the
Yeah. Yeah.
wound provides.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, it's a really, really big one. um yeah,
I think
it's huge. Yeah,
we're negating any sort of masculinity because of the bad representations of masculinity that have left us with a trauma. And now it's just like, now we're not going to listen to any sort of structure, any sort of rules, any sort of tradition, any sort of culture. And we're just going to progress
right.
more into confusion and chaos, because if you don't have a guideline, which is more of a masculine energy, like a structure, then
Mhm.
everything's just gonna just progressively become more chaotic and more confusing as time goes, because that's what happens when you just free flow all the time. You're like a
Well,
balloon in the wind. It just
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. In the, the macrocosm as a generalization for sure, but at the crux of it, it's trust. It's
trust.
trust with
Yeah,
authority.
learning to
That's
trust.
really,
Yes, it's
yeah,
amazing
and
how
yeah,
it's such a simple. I was talking about this in the previous podcast, is that oftentimes the
mhm,
truth we're looking for is the simplest thing. And it's just learning to trust each other again, learning to trust ourselves. I mean, in my
that's it.
opinion, you can tell me a bit. We can go a bit into trust, but in my opinion, from the trust, for me, learning to trust myself, or learning about trust again, or trusting again, was often me learning to trust myself. And then, because it's not that we shouldn't trust other people, but I think a lot of the issue with trust is actually within ourselves. We don't trust ourselves enough to be able to handle whatever comes our way. So
Yes,
if I
that's
don't
it.
trust myself, then I wouldn't put some effort into building a relationship with you, because I immediately
Yeah,
think that this is gonna, go this way and that way. But when I trust myself, it doesn't matter if it goes this way or that way. But the point is
yeah,
to try and put that
yeah.
effort into building relationships, and some might fail and some might work, but you never know which ones will work and which ones will fail unless you trust yourself to put the effort into building a relationship and seeing what happens. And
Well,
then
this
trust
is the
yourself to
thing
deal
with
with it, with whatever comes. Yes, sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're feeling safe and confident within
Mhm.
yourself
Yeah.
because you trust yourself and you're showing up for yourself and your boundaries and your needs. And so it's like it's a non-issue because you're really clear in yourself. But that's the thing, for empaths, but specifically, it's just really the avoidance of the wound. And that's what you're talking about, this free flow. And because they're actually just avoiding those wounds, those very specific wounds being activated. I did it for years and years and years until I was really able to work on it. It was very challenging. And so I have,
What brought you to realize that that was what you were looking at? I mean, after years of running and making that the way that you did things, what brought you to that point of like, oh, that's what it is, and now I need to work on it?
Education.
Education.
It's
Oh,
just
okay.
because it shine, it's like, what is it, 10, 11, the darkness of ignorance I am within your heart. And, so I shine a light on that darkness of ignorance, right? And through the right knowledge. But
Mm.
it's not just spiritual knowledge, it's knowledge about your emotional world. It's just so, so, so important. And to be able to apply it, I think it's one of, empath superpowers is they can look very deeply inside and be very honest with themselves. But not only that, they show up and do the work. And I think it's one of the great things about empaths and highly sensitive people, because they think so deeply, they feel so deeply everything. And so they want to just do the
But
work. They want to get
maybe
better. They
that's a
want to be
blessing
whole.
in disguise. Because I mean, if you think
Yes.
about it, our real purpose here in this world, in this material world, is to serve. And so in order
Yeah.
to serve, you really have to think deeply about life, because if you don't think deeply enough, you're not going to come to a point of understanding what life is about and what you're about and who you truly are. Because that can only come through uh, really philosophically thinking about life. Who am I? What is this life about?
Yeah.
You know, are we
Yes.
just all here for some random reason? Were we just like what some scientists would say, we just came out of nothing and now we're here? Which
Yeah.
some
Bless them.
to on a face value, you could sort of make sense of that. But if you think deeply enough, it doesn't make sense. How
Yeah.
how are we so complexly uniquely made, and there's nothing that designed us? I mean, if anything, like everything in this world, this mouse, my cell phone, the most complicated watches, the most complicated computer systems, there's always like a designer and a creator behind it. And we're
Absolutely.
even more complex. The universe is even more complex. The way that the Earth revolve around the sun in such a straightforward or
It's
how do
so
you say,
amazing.
systematic
Yeah.
way. And people
Yes.
say that there's no designer or creator behind it, but there has to be a creator behind this really complex computer, because how else did it come to be? It just
Yeah.
doesn't. If you think about it logically or deep enough, then the conclusion is there must be some sort of creator or designer behind the most complex systems in this world, because otherwise, how
Yeah.
else did it just come out of nothing?
It's quite incredible, actually, that, when people are suffering so much, particularly in Kali Yuga, particularly at this time,
Mm.
um, that, we're even pondering or contemplating these things. Really, I think it's really incredible that we are. And yeah, that is a wonderful thing about empaths, that they do think really deeply, that they want to go to the truth. They want to, go to the core of things. So yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's
Someone
really,
once
really
told
wonderful.
me, they looked at me very like the corner of their eye type of look, that sidelong glance. And they said to me that
Yeah.
they said it in a specific way, but I'm going to relay it in a more like consumable way for the people who are listening. But they said that a really spiritually advanced person becomes like the skin on the eye. They become so thin and sensitive to the world around them that they it's not like you overburden yourself with the world's problems, but you're super aware that my
Yes.
happiness doesn't exist without the progression and the happiness of the world around me, because we're all interconnected and we're all
Yeah.
here. We're all in the same boat, even though
Yeah.
there are certain things that we may think separate us, like status or class or money or your skin color or where you were born in the world. We all think these designations separate us, but really we're all on the same earth. We're all here
Yeah.
together, and this is like the
Yeah.
earth is like one boat. And if we don't in some way come to learn to work and trust one another and work together in some way or another, then we're all going to sink the ship at some point. I mean, that's what the world is doing. That's what we're doing in the world, in my opinion, is that there are certain people who are just taking everything from everybody else and using all the resources for themselves, and they're forgetting that all these other people are here with us. There's no difference between that person and this person, because when you die we're all the same, right? Even here we're all the
Yeah.
same. We're all just
It's
skin and
crazy how
bones.
people can be so connected with their ego that, they're so immersed in this type of consciousness. It's really hard to fathom sometimes, I think, because, we're connected with such spiritual principles, and yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking and yeah, disheartening to kind of feel that. But I also feel like each person is just on their own trajectory,
Mm.
and that's exactly how it's supposed to be, and that we're not supposed to have control. Of course, we're supposed to care, of course. And if it's in our, reach and our dharma to do something, absolutely. But I just feel like it's our responsibility to evolve spiritually, to evolve and grow, and that's it. That's really it. That's why we're here.
And I think that by doing that, you ultimately start a ripple of consciousness that
Yes.
helps other people to do it, because
Yeah.
ultimately both of what we're saying is true, is that we're all
Yes.
here together, and we should all be aware of that, and then also realizing that everybody is on their own journey at the same time. But the more
Yeah.
we evolve, the more we can ripple that effect into other people, and then the more we start to evolve together, or at least
Yes.
start to evolve as well. So my
Yeah.
evolution may not be the same as yours, because doing more, I
Yeah.
do more or less work than you in terms of whatever
Yeah.
spiritual progress
Like
we're trying to
something
make.
different, or
Yeah.
yeah.
But my
You're
ripple
probably
of
lifetimes more evolved than me.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. Yeah. I think maybe the fact that we're here together in some sense means we're very on a similar frequency. Otherwise, we wouldn't
Yeah,
be connecting and having this conversation. So,
you never
um,
know. Only Krishna knows, really,
yeah, oh yeah,
isn't it?
really. Like, yeah, there's that's the thing that I always think, is that, we're so I mean, I can talk for myself. I'm so quick to judge people sometimes, but I have no idea what that person has done in any of their previous life to where they are now.
Yeah.
So, I
Yes.
mean, yeah, like there's that one story where that Brahmin, or I I don't know if he was a Brahmin, but he was blind, um not blind, but he couldn't read. He was illiterate. But he kept reading the spiritual literature of his time, the Bhagavad Gita,
Yes.
and he kept weeping and weeping and
Mhm.
weeping. And then eventually, a form of God, or a form of the divine, came to him and said to him, why are you weeping? You can't even read. And I forget the exact answer he gave, but it was something that he just felt so deeply connected to the literature, even just being in its
Yeah.
presence, just looking at the images, that he just knew that this was the truth. And everyone was making fun of him because he was illiterate and he couldn't read, but here he is
Yeah.
crying over a book. And this guy was so much more advanced because he could just sense that deep spiritual
Yeah.
connection of the literature. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's so easy to put people in a box, quick, quick, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
But we really have
Definitely.
no idea where that person has come from and what's going on, and where they're going with their life. So it's good to be
Yes.
aware of that. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. It's very true. I think we so easily, I know for myself, I do all the time. I forget that, I can get impatient. Like,
Yeah.
I've said I've just moved to Bali, and yeah, I get, because seen and heard, that's a big one for empaths as well. It's that they often don't feel seen and heard. So they want to, push themselves away from the world. And sometimes it'll come up for me, like I notice myself, feeling impatient because I
Yeah.
can't, connect, or they don't understand me. So that will come up, and I'm just like, you don't know, You don't know what they're going through. You don't know
Mm.
what's, happening in their lives. Just be patient. What is this experience teaching you? What is Krishna trying to teach you here? So yeah,
But we
and you
also
just
don't
you
realize the difference that our presence makes in people's lives sometimes.
yeah,
Not that we're
yes,
super special.
definitely.
I'm not trying to say, oh, we're super special, but just through
No,
us
just generally
being
everyone.
present. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
some
yeah.
people can think that, oh my God, this guy is like I'm looking at myself through other people's eyes, is that they could think that, oh my God, this guy is such a positive influence. But here I am thinking, these people aren't, getting with the program, and I'm getting frustrated. And they're just thinking, wow, this guy's so lovely. Whenever he comes around, he's got such a
Oh,
positive attitude, or this
yeah.
lady has such a positive attitude. But here I'm thinking negatively of all these people because they're not on
Yeah,
the same
sure.
page as me, and I'm getting frustrated. But through
Yep.
that patient showing up, through that patient consistency, you
Yeah.
sort of give people more of your vibe. You give people more of the energy that you are holding, and that slowly opens them up to something different. But I mean, whether or
Definitely.
not that happens is out of
Yeah.
our control. But I mean, that's how when I reflect on it, that's how I see when I show up, and I'm just there. Even though I feel like some people I don't connect with, I'll show up anyway because it's got nothing to do with those people. Me showing up has nothing to do with anybody else. But at the
Yeah.
same time, me showing
Yeah.
up can help influence people just through the act of showing up and being there, whatever that means to you.
Yeah, I think having the sadhana, having the meditation practice that we do as bhakti yogis, it can be not for everyone, but it can be quite easy to slip into that connection of service and just being an instrument.
Mm,
And I love just going out here and going to different places and just really sitting with that and meeting new people and yeah, it's just been so magical to have those heart-to-heart exchanges. Even people that don't, English isn't their first language, just really, and they've only got very limited vocabulary in English. Just connecting in with that heart space, we can understand each other. It's really, really beautiful. So I understand what you mean there.
And
Yeah.
I often have thought about the idea, I'm sure you must have heard about it as well, but where your actions mean so much more than your words sometimes. Like you could have someone that is so philosophically inclined and they could tell you everything
Mm,
about everything, but it just flies over the head of most people because it's just
yeah.
too much in the mind.
Yes,
But someone
absolutely.
who is imbibing from the heart and the mind, they've got a good balance of both. Oftentimes that we do, I think it's very underestimated in today's day and age, is when someone can really imbibe their teachings and just be a good representation and let their
Yeah.
actions speak for them, basically.
Well, that's, what authenticity means, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're applying what you know, you're being an example of that. It's so seldom. My goodness, it's so seldom today. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I strive for. And I think, a lot of people on that healing journey, there's really striving for that too, because it means that, we're yeah, we're connected with who we are in the moment. And then from that space, we can evolve, we can really grow. Yeah. But it's also nice to just have that example in our lives. Definitely. It's really yeah, it's seldom. It's very seldom.
So I just want to backtrack a little bit. I really appreciate where the conversation is going. I just want to backtrack a little bit and hopefully bring a bit more context into where we are now. So I want to know just a bit more about your journey. Like you said, you went through some suffering. I mean, we all have in some sense, but you can
Totally.
maybe help us, inform us where you came from to where you are now. Like give us a little summary or an insight into your world, how you got, from when you were little um, to growing up to realizing, there must be more in the world, and then eventually taking on a spiritual journey and then becoming a coach. Yeah.
Wow, it's going to be challenging to shorten that. I will try to stick to the
Let's go
points,
with
but
it. Yeah. Yeah.
it's okay. So I think like most empath women, I don't know about empath men, but I think like most, there was just just a sense of wanting more, or wanting to understand the truth, you know, feeling alone, or feeling disconnected, or not knowing how to connect, not knowing how to fit in. That was definitely a huge theme.
Feeling
Um,
misunderstood.
yeah,
Mm,
it was just, yeah, misunderstood, but they're slightly different, not just feeling seen and heard.
mm,
Whereas, yeah, misunderstood is it's slightly different. Whereas, yeah, you just don't feel that connection, especially if it doesn't come from your caregivers. Like, I was always the emotional parent to both my parents.
mm,
And then I just took on that role, naturally, to everyone in the family. So whether they liked it or not, especially as I grew, thankfully I was able to shift it. But it just created this, like, well, I have to be perfect. I have to have all the answers,
mm.
because if I don't, that's pretty scary, because they
Everything's
definitely
gonna
don't, and they
burn.
don't know how to. Sorry.
I said everything's gonna burn. It's gonna go
Everything's
chaotic.
going to blow up. Well, it's just like, if they don't have the answer, that's, you know, I know they don't have the answer, so I should have to have the answer,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
pretty scary.
yeah.
So, yeah, constantly wanting to know the truth, but it wasn't just about, yeah, well, it wasn't just wanting to get out of suffering. That was a big part of it, even into early 20s, before I became a monk or a brahmacharini. It was more about, yeah, just wanting to know the truth. What is God? What does this all mean? Why am I here? Like, I
So,
would just,
so you're saying that all of that, what you would have deemed like a negative experience, being unseen, unheard, misunderstood, taking on responsibility too early, got you to think a bit more deeply about life, and got you to open up to the idea that this can't be who I am in
this can't
entirely.
be it.
Yeah, this can't be
Yeah.
it. Okay, okay.
It's copying everything. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, suffering will do that to you for sure.
That's
Yeah,
the purpose
that's
of it,
right.
right? I mean,
That's it.
the divine purpose of suffering. Yeah, it's just supposed to
Yes.
get us to crack us open a little bit more to new ways of thinking and being. Yeah,
Break the heart wide open, not break it in two, break it open.
open. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that was definitely a journey, until I met the devotees, or it was just before that. I think, again, it kind of came up. I started when I was 19 with Vipassana. Have
Mm.
you heard? Is it
Yeah,
in South Africa? Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So I think most people have kind of, know what it is, or have had an experience now. It's kind of a household word.
Mm.
Yeah, so I started with that. And then it was just this progression of kind of like trying everything and studying everything, like Ayurveda and Taoism, and just every type of yoga practice, every type of like meditation practice, just so many different things. And I got, coaching certificates and shiatsu certificates, and I started my own business with massage and energy healing. So, got all the Reiki things, and yeah, diploma of shiatsu, and, all of these different things. And, I started this little practice, and I was seeing clients, but I just felt like I wasn't really able to offer them anything. Like, it just felt like what I knew was like this, even though I had studied so much, and explored so much, it was just so superficial.
Mm.
And then, I was fortunate to meet a traveling monk. So he was at the Govinda's restaurant, and we just ended up speaking for about 8 hours. It was just this never ending. It was just amazing. It was just like he was just pouring
Okay.
energy, knowledge into me. It was really, really profound. And I just woke up the next day and I'm like, I have to join the ashram. I just have to.
At what age was that? What age was that?
I was 24. Yeah,
24. Okay.
24.
Okay.
So yeah, a while ago. Yeah, so then it took me a little while to close down my business, and then I joined the ashram in Sydney. and I've never been a city girl, and I wasn't about to start, so I then moved to New Govardhan. Are you familiar
I've
with the
heard.
temples?
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, so New Govardhan, and that is still 100% my, yeah, one of my spiritual homes for sure. And then, yeah, from there, just traveling to India, America, and Canada. Not so much the UK, and never South Africa, unfortunately.
You should come.
And I
It's a nice place. Yeah.
yeah, I've
Very
heard.
nice place.
Yes, my friend, one of my very good friends, she lived there for a couple of years. Really, really beautiful community, I've heard. Like very, very beautiful community there. Um, yeah, so I was doing like sharing spiritual books, as we call book distribution. I was doing that for a little while.
Mhm.
Um, but I actually really burnt out. I actually
Mhm.
fully broke
Mhm.
because what I was doing was completely disconnecting from
Your
my
Dharma.
emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like the things that like I just taking from what you said, I also something similar. Like we have a very similar
Interesting.
outline of how things. I also do shiatsu. I also do Reiki, and
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Wow. You're
yeah. And so I
cool.
also do like I teach people Reiki, and I don't want to say I coach, but it
Oh,
comes through in my practice where I'm a
wow.
Reiki master, so I teach Reiki to people, and a part of the course is I often bring them down to the point of that it's an everyday thing. It's not just now you have a certificate and you rock up to your sessions and you're a Reiki practitioner. It's the
Yes.
things you do every single day, so it's a lifestyle at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So anyway, so I
Beautiful.
also
Thank you for sharing that.
I
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
went and lived in the ashram. I stayed for as a full-time monk. I only stayed in for a year, but it took me a year to realize that full-time monk life, full-time ashram life is not my thing. So
Yeah. It
I
took me 5 years to figure that
it
out.
took you 5 years, yeah, and a burnout of I'm sure not just one, but a few
Yes.
burnouts. And then I
Yes.
also came to the realization that I have gifts. I'm naturally very
You
intuitive.
have
I'm
something to
very good.
offer.
Yes. And through
Yes.
these gifts, through these expressions of myself, I can bring through spiritual things. I can bring through spiritual
Yes.
consciousness. And it's
That's
more at
it.
my own pace. I wasn't just like letting everybody else dictate my life for me and
Yes.
then burning out
Yes.
because I was listening
Because
to what
it's like
everybody else was saying. Yeah.
exactly, because even in Srila Prabhupada says in the Sri Upanishad, start from where you are. And this is where we struggle so much as young
Even in Bhagavad
yoginis.
Gita, it says that, what you should follow your own path, even if it's imperfect, because yeah, if you're just
Yes.
trying to be like someone else,
But
it's
because we don't
inauthentic.
have a culture, we
Yeah,
struggle with that so much and
yeah.
what that means. And it's important to get that training, I believe. I think it's very
Mm.
important for both men and women.
It grounds you in a
Probably,
sense. It sets up also a
yes.
framework to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yes, but there are only certain communities that actually will encourage you to then connect it with your Dharma,
Yes. Yeah.
connect it with
Yeah.
who you are.
Yes.
And that's what I think is missing
Yeah.
massively. And not just within our bhakti community, but within all, religious and
The
spiritual
whole world.
teachings.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think because it has to go together. Again, the emotional and the spiritual, we have to apply them together. Otherwise, we're, bypassing over here in the spiritual, or we're going, so far into our psyche that we're just
Getting lost.
connecting with
Yeah. Yeah.
nothingness, or
Yeah.
just yeah, it's just becomes we just become disconnected. So in neither are we connecting with our authentic self, and if we're not doing that, we're not going to be able to really connect with the soul and in a consistent way. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I
You
love that.
have moments of spurts of like really deep engagements,
Mm.
spiritually, but then you end up crashing for a longer time and then you
Yes,
disconnect completely and then you may come back
yes,
and do the same spike again, but then you disconnect
yes,
again after that for a very long time and then it's just
yeah,
not consistent. And I mean,
yes.
what healthy relationship will make you spike and crash and spike and crash? And that sounds like a very toxic relationship, actually.
So toxic. Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. And it's because we're not, I mean, especially as Westerners, we don't understand duty. We don't know,
Mm.
who we are at that dharmic level. Yeah, an interesting book. I just met with Urmila. She was traveling through here. So for those that don't know, she's a really prominent mentor and guide in our Bhakti Yoga community. And yeah, she's written this great book about your Dharma. Have you heard of it? Yeah.
Yeah,
No?
she's come to Cape Town.
Yeah.
That's one of the first experiences I had with the temple, is I saw her talking. But I was so like uninterested. I was half in, half out. So I came for a talk
Sure.
and then I left because I felt like it was just too much for me. But anyway, so
Sure.
I did see her. She was giving a class and stuff. But now that I've grown a bit more and deepened my connection
Yes.
with this path, I see her and I appreciate, the work she is doing. Yeah, more.
Yeah. Yes, I think that she's someone who is just so broad-minded, and there are very few, I think, that have that kind of gift. Vaisheshika Kapoor is another one.
Mahatma Prabhu as well.
Definitely
Yeah,
Mahatma
yeah.
Prabhu, Radhanath
And the
Swami as well. I'm quite
Prabhupada. Yeah, yeah.
obviously biased there. Bhaktivedanta Goswami. Yeah, very, yeah. So yeah, there are a few. There's definitely a few, but I think that it's just very seldom that we have that kind of, open mind and broad-minded view and understand, understand that aspect and kind of living that example. So yeah, yeah. I can't remember how we got onto that
So yeah, I
now,
was
but
just thinking, coming back to the point of your journey. So you developed yourself materially, you got all these certifications, then you realize like it's like a Rice Krispie. It was all nice on the outside, but
yeah,
then you squish it, there's nothing on the inside.
yep, that's how it is. I like
I
it.
call
Yeah,
I call people like that Rice Krispies, when they have so much stuff outside, but they have nothing interesting inside. They're Rice Krispie people. You can just squish them and there's nothing.
that's
So you developed yourself like a Rice Krispie. You became a Rice Krispie, and then you realized I'm a Rice Krispie, and then you went into more developing the internal world, and your connection with the divine. And then, yeah, we were at that point, and then we went off a little bit.
yeah. So it was kind of, but again, if I look back, there's an aspect, even though, for me, and I think for most empaths, there's always an aspect of wanting to grow spiritually. Like it's a huge interest. It's a
Mm.
huge interest. So for me, definitely, but it was also to avoid that activated wound, to avoid that past karma and all of those things coming up, right? So I can honestly say that for myself, that that was an underlying truth there, and which ultimately led to my demise, in a sense, of completely burning out and almost in a sense destroying myself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, because I just pushed myself so far, because to avoid those wounds being activated, or even the voice of those wounds kind of leading the way, so that they weren't going to be activated. So I didn't have to feel that pain, right? I would just keep, getting validation
In a sense, would you
externally.
say it was like avoiding responsibility by taking up other responsibilities? I don't know if that
It's
makes sense.
no, it makes complete sense. It definitely makes sense. And you could look at it like that.
Like you're avoiding
Um,
the responsibility of who you actually are by taking on other responsibilities which they're beneficial, but not authentically beneficial.
yeah, because I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
It's not that I was
Yeah,
consciously actively going,
you weren't like,
oh,
I
I
know
want to
exactly what
avoid
I have to
taking.
do and I'm just not gonna do
Yeah.
it. Yeah. It's like an unconscious avoidance.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not, that's why I don't put it in that way, because it's just, yeah, and that's what the avoiding the activated wounds is, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, and we're just,
Mm,
churning out more illusion, because that's what those wounds and all those filters that the wounds govern, that's what they are. They're just complete illusion, but they're so strong
mm,
because we made it mean that's who I am from
mm,
whatever age. For
mm.
me, it was very young. That's who I am. So, I have to avoid that. I have to avoid that pain. I have to avoid those things being activated. But yes, essentially, it's avoiding that responsibility for sure. Yeah, for
So
sure.
you hit a moment when you were being a Rice Krispie of realizing there's nothing internal. Then you hit a moment filling the internal that now there's nothing external. So then
Yeah.
you sort of then what made you think I need to bring the two together to have by internal external I mean spiritual and material. What made you realize that I had to bring the two together in order to be a healthy version of myself?
Well, it took me a good few months just to recover
Mm,
physically. I could barely even move. That's to the point that I got myself. It was quite extreme actually. And yes, it took me a few months, and then I was just able to gently slip back into, massage and energy healing, and in the community, within the community. They're very supportive, very loving. And yeah, from there, just more education, more education, more education, until I found attachment theory, and that's what, really, yeah, is
Open
quite,
door.
I find, yeah, really transformed my life,
Okay.
and is a great, yeah, I don't know what the point was, that it has to be both. I think, for a while there, I was just doing a lot of self-soothing, a lot of somatic stuff, and which is wonderful. And I still use it to this day, and I still, really use it with my clients, and it's a big part of the program. But it can only get you to a certain point unless you start challenging those beliefs that are within there. Then you're just going to have to keep self-soothing your whole life, and keep having to do that. And to a point, it equilibrates things. And I guess it was that, that information, from attachment theory, that really helped to, um, give a foundation, I suppose, to that emotional world, instead of it just being about, the spiritual, or, the subtle. It's like, no, actually, this is a really important science that I think a lot of people really need to understand. And so is our bhakti science as well, the real science.
I'm not, so even in the Reiki world, like, so I teach Reiki, so the history is something that I go through very often with my students, specifically the new students. And there
Beautiful.
was even a point for Dr. Usui, who he was the like re-founder of Reiki. He just brought it back into everyday life, where he
Yeah.
realized that every one of the Buddhist temples at that time was so focused on trying to connect to the soul that they forgot about the more physical sides of themselves. And so
Yeah.
that's what got him so like on this journey, is that they were basically denying aspects of themselves. And in some
Yes.
sense, I don't think it's about being on a spiritual path. You don't deny yourself things, but it's more like choosing the higher path. But sometimes we're
Yeah.
overcompensating by choosing things that are a bit too out of our reach, and we're consistently choosing them, and that's creating a very unbalanced system within ourselves.
Yeah.
So we're not being very true to who we actually are and where we are, and we're jumping the gun, we're jumping steps, and yeah,
Yeah,
we're
because we
creating
don't
issues.
have that framework to
Yeah,
begin with.
yeah,
That's why, especially if we have all of those trauma filters, and, for empath women, it's like we're going to have all of those. So that's why I focus predominantly on emotional mastery. And some we don't even get to focus that much on, divine alignment, because that's where their evolution is at. And that's what's important to them, is just to master those skills first. Because if we don't have that, there's just, we can't, we're not going to be able to. It's like we were talking about, it's that, kind of toxic relationship. It just goes
yeah.
up and down. And this is what it means for empaths. We're not very, we really struggle with consistency. It's probably shouldn't even be in our vocabulary. It's a real thing, right? It's a real thing.
But I
We
mean,
go
I
to,
don't know about that. I mean, I am pretty consistent with what I do, and I consider myself to be very empathetic as well. I'm very intuitive. I can pick up on things. I think mine's more of like a trauma-related thing, though. I had to be very aware of my parents, and not that my parents were bad. They didn't do anything negative, like they weren't abusive or anything like that. But my dad just very withdrawn emotionally, so I always had to guess what was going on. So I got very good at guessing, and therefore
I can relate to that.
I
Mm.
developed a skill in a sense. I developed a very good
Yes.
way to
Yep.
guess what was happening, and I can still do it unconsciously. I do it all the time. Sometimes I just know exactly what's happening because I'm just guessing all the time. I'm putting two and two
Yeah.
together, and I'm like, boom. And then oftentimes I'm right. Obviously, I do have my times when I'm very wrong, and then that's my own trauma related
Right. You're seeing yourself,
thing.
you're projecting.
I'm projecting
Yeah.
myself. Yeah, yeah. And
Yes. The hard thing to navigate sometimes,
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a healer, for sure.
Hmm. And yeah, I forget why I was saying that.
Well, we were talking about this up and down, and I'm really glad that you shared what you just shared, because I do find, and this is another reason that I yeah, it can be another reason why I don't work with men, because it's, again, most men, they lean towards dismissive avoidant, which means externally it will be like they're so consistent. Oh, so consistent. Yeah. But it's hard for them to, and I'm not saying for you, because I don't think it is. I think you're quite healthy, quite secure. That's why you can,
I don't
that's
know,
why
but
you're
I actually am
consistent
quite
and
avoidant.
able to
I'm not
in.
gonna lie.
But I just find, as a rule, most men lean towards dismissive avoidant, because it's harder for them to connect in with their emotions. It's a completely different spin on how to connect them in. And it's really just so different. And it will be, that barrier around connecting so much bigger and so much, and not for all men, again, not for all men, but
But
just as a
generally, like,
general rule,
yeah,
which
yeah.
I guess it's not good to generalize, but that's what I've noticed with the men who, yeah, and they'll always lean towards dismissive avoidance. Yeah, always. And again, we can show up at different intervals of a relationship with different things as well. So, but yeah, that's why it will look like this, because for dismissive avoidance, it's always it's very important for them to have that, and for them to have, like, it's too scary. It's too much. They
Too
won't. They
scary
don't
to go
like
up
it.
and down.
Well, yeah. Well, it's just they can't trust in it. It's just they can't put their faith. They can't put their trust. So to have, they see that, they're like, I can't really trust that person, or I can't really even respect that person. That's usually what it comes down to, actually,
You mean if the
is respect.
person's going up and down, then we will
Yes.
automatically just put them in a box and be like untrustworthy, too erratic.
Sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
If
it's
they have,
healthy. I think it's healthy in a sense because, you don't, like, for me, just from my perspective, is that you don't want to bring too many people in that are always up and down, because that's just so much
yeah,
effort to have to, because then I have to extend myself and manage that, you know? Or because I'm not saying that I have to manage it, but I feel like I have to, because now this person can't regulate themselves. So I'm not saying that you can't have ups and downs, because I have ups and downs, but it's just like conserving my energy for people that who can or are taking the responsibility to be the best version of themselves, and taking the
absolutely.
responsibility to learn and at least progress in learning to emotionally regulate and keep themselves
Yeah.
consistent, because otherwise I have to go out of my way to extend to deal with that,
Well, unless they're leaning towards being a healthy version of themselves, it's going to be pretty challenging to have a relationship with someone like that. But I just meant, as a rule,
Mm,
just for, why, yeah, I guess as a rule for, dismissive avoidant men, and that's just if they're really leaning into that. Whereas I'm
mm.
saying for men, most will lean into that, but hopefully there's a lot of, security there and connection there, and they're able to express. That's usually what men struggle to do. They just express, whereas for empath women, it's too much like this, and maybe too much, expression. And
I think in general, it's just the nature of women, more feminine quotes,
yes,
just
that
to
too.
go up and down and to be
Yes, of
more
course.
more airy fairy than a man. A man's job is to be a bit more consistent. Um,
You'd hope, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially. I mean, we're again generalizing, but essentially,
Yeah.
men were designed to be more focused on doing, whereas women are more centered, supposed to be more centered around nurturing and caring. So it doesn't really matter, you can go up and down as long as there's a nurture, as long as you're, caring, and you have that heart-centeredness, which is a bit more up and down anyway. It's a bit more spontaneous. It's a bit more, yeah, a bit lighter. Whereas a man, essentially, I'm
If
not
we're
saying we
talking
have.
about, I was, mainly talking, I totally agree with what you're
Mm,
saying. Absolutely. And I think if we're looking at it without all the trauma filters and attachment
mm,
styles and stuff, yes, for sure. But that's really that's rarely the case, right? In
Yeah,
our
because we're all
society,
individuals.
we're
We're
going to have
individuals. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
much, so many trauma filters and so much stuff. And I was just specifically talking about what kind of happens when those two attachment styles come together. That's what happens as a rule. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It can be quite yeah, challenging, really challenging in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so
Wow, I feel like we really got on. How did we
yeah, I
get to
know.
that?
It's just an explosion of of information. Um,
I think yeah, I was saying that, yeah, it's this inconsistency, and you were like, no, actually, I feel really, really consistent, and then I'm able to connect in with those things as well. And then we just went on to that, yeah, attachment styles, I think.
yeah,
If
I
that
the
makes sense.
reason why, just coming back to consistency, the reason why
Mm,
I prefer consistency is because things get done when you're consistent, you know? I mean,
it's
it gets done
important.
more consistently than if one was to be more in touch with just, I feel like doing this and I feel like doing that. And I think coming back to what we were talking about earlier is I think that that's where society is a bit too leaning a bit too heavily into in today's day and ages, solely going based on what you feel, which to some extent isn't a bad thing. We should tap into how we're feeling. We should tap into our uniqueness, but not forsaking everything else in the name of our independence, in the name of what we feel, in the name of our uniqueness, because we still have to be a part of a society. We still have to function, and there still has to be like a progression for how things move forward, because
Yeah.
ultimately we are all not we all don't belong in this world. It's not our home, and we should be leading each other back to our home, and that means we need to have a structure. There needs to be a healthy routine and a healthy framework so that we can all make it back. Without that,
It's so
yeah,
important. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. It's so, so, so important to have that. I think we should all be striving for consistency. I mean, it's the mode of goodness, right? Maintaining. Absolutely. It's so important. It's just it can just be very challenging to do without that trust of self,
Mm.
right? If you're still healing those wounds. And I don't think this at all includes yourself. But just more for those, women that might be tuning in, that are struggling with that, and just to know that it's okay if that's not there, especially in the beginning, or if it's just really hard, like your own version of that is going to come in when the time is right. Yeah.
And I just felt like I wanted to add, like, as if you're a woman and you're listening to this, you don't have to become a man in order to make yourself survive in this world. You can actually tune into your superpower. A superpower every woman has is your feminine energy. It is something that every man in this world actually wants, is that feminine essence. But a lot of what I'm seeing, or what I've seen, is women are forsaking that again, or disconnecting from it, from a trauma space, and just, now I have to become like a man to survive in this world, and now I have to do what men do. And to some extent, yes, depending on the circumstance, because some women are single mothers, some women have no support in their lives, and they have to provide and they have to protect their family. And so I understand that that's there, and there are those circumstances, and I can't imagine that it's easy in that circumstance. And at the same time, I also want to just remind women out there that, there is something that you have. Your superpower is being a woman. It's not trying to become like a man. It is being a woman. That's who God, that's who the divine designed you to be in this lifetime. You got this body for a reason. So tune into those powers, tune into that essence, and, you work with it at the end of the day, because that's what you were given. That's why are we jumping away from the gift we were given, trying to get something else that's not ours? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really comes from that, just survival mode, isn't it? It's
Mhm.
just, yeah, it's an unconscious thing, but it's really beautiful. That's really nice that you're sharing that. And yeah, sharing that inspiration. I think it's important to remember, you know, that yeah, we are in these bodies for a reason. It's part of our evolution to yeah, to embrace that for
Mm.
sure. For
And
sure.
embrace what comes with it. I mean, it's a journey, right? Like, rather be authentically yourself than trying to pretend to be someone else for your whole life, you know? I mean, because what you're going to gain by that, except realizing, oh, that's not who I am. But when you're being authentic, you can really actually make really epic progress, you know? And you can
Yeah,
expand
I
yourself
don't
in
think
ways
that
that you never.
any of it's like a real conscious thing, you know,
Yeah,
like a
no,
lot
sure.
of the women that I connect with, they're just coming out of like really abusive
Mhm.
relationships. They're really just trying to find themselves, and you know, their aspect of femininity doesn't really even come into it because
Mhm.
they're just trying to learn that emotional mastery. I find it's more something that comes in a little later once they have feel more secure, they've got those tools,
Mhm.
and you know, they can just connect in with that part of themselves and feel safe. Because yeah, if we don't feel safe, you know, then we just can't. So it's just this, and it does, you're right, I think you're you know, really, it's interesting to have this conversation actually, because yeah, I think it would probably come off as extremely masculine, right? That survival mode from
It
women.
does,
Is
yeah.
that what you've
Yeah,
experienced?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Mm.
The idea that because men are a certain way, that now I can learn to do everything myself, and therefore I don't essentially need a man, um, is a big survival tactic in my opinion. And
Yeah.
because we do all
Yeah.
need each other. Men, at the end of the day, we need women, we need nurture, we need
Yeah.
care. Without that, we would
And
be a
women
very
need
hard,
men as
cold
well.
world. Yeah, because
Yeah.
without the men, there would be very little structure and very little, you know, stability in terms of, to a greater degree, like mental stability, emotional stability, because men naturally have that because we were designed to do certain things, basically. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's like, you know, one of my spiritual teachers, the man provides the field and the woman controls within it, right? Hopefully not too aggressively.
Yeah. Or
But
whatever. But I
yeah,
mean, if that's your
there
style,
is,
but
it's a sense
yeah,
of
yeah.
like gravity, a groundedness, and when that isn't respected, definitely it's very debilitating. Like I remember having a conversation online. I don't know if you know him, David Madhava, bless him. He's a wonderful soul.
Yes, I've
Um,
heard of him from one of the America, right?
yeah,
Very good.
yeah, yeah,
Very
great soul. Yeah, really, yeah. He just articulates himself and the Shastra in just a very grounded and mature way. I just really, really, really admire it, and particularly about the dynamics between men and women. And
good. Mm,
yeah, it's just that for men, they're constantly battling with Maya, you know, and that failure is so prominent. And if the woman is also very aggressive and, you know, yeah, masculine in that sense, because that's how she's, you know, had to be, right? And there's no trust, and there's that challenge with authority, and there's that abandonment wound, all of that's coming up. Absolutely, it's going to be really toxic and really, anyway, I can't say toxic, but it can lead to toxicity, but it just really damaging to the man's heart and consciousness for sure, for the woman too.
mm,
But yeah, very, very damaging, very, very damaging. And it happens so, so, so much. It's very disheartening. Yeah.
mm, mm.
Yeah. So I'm happy that you said that. It's really, yeah, it's really, really
Yeah, it's
nice.
like remembering, even though, I mean, I'm not saying you forget your trauma. I'm not saying you just dismiss anything you've gone through, but I think through the process of healing is remembering the softness of who you are as a woman. You know, remembering
Yeah.
that, yeah, just coming back to that and just, you know, not forgetting it at the end. You know,
You
it's
just,
not about dismissing
sorry.
anything. Reminding yourself, you know, that's it's such a unique quality to women. Men don't have that essentially. We have a caring side, but it's like, and I'm not saying we can't be soft, but it's not like a prominent
Yeah,
for a
it's
man,
true.
you know?
Yeah.
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 We're more
Yeah. No,
designed
I
to
totally
be a
get what
bit
you're saying.
harder because we're supposed to go out there, we're supposed to do things and build and do, and that's how we thrive off
Yeah.
achievements, doing things, you know, that's
Battling it out, you know?
battling it out,
Yeah, it's
war,
battling it
fighting,
out. Yeah.
you know, that's when I
Yeah.
feel like that's when I feel, no, I'm not saying it's the only time I feel good, but it's one of the times I feel really good is when I'm really pushing out there and I'm doing stuff and I'm working out and I'm having good conversations and I'm, you know, having conversations where we're really like battling with each other and, you know, and stuff like that. It's really invigorating for a man.
Having that intellectual stimulation, you mean?
Intellectual, physical stimulation, intellectual
Yep.
stimulation, you know,
Mm.
emotional stimulation, learning to master one's emotions as a man is also a very big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. It's interesting you say that about the softening. I'm just finishing up with a client. She's just completing the 6-month program, and one of some of her feedback about how she's transformed is that she's so much nicer to her husband, and that she used to get so frustrated that you know, she'd just really snap, you know, if he hadn't taken out the rubbish or this wasn't done. Or now it's just like she can feel so safe in herself. She's not listening to those trauma filters. They're not a part of her world, and that she's just, you know, really happy in the home. Not that all women have to be in the home and cooking, but she
Mm,
just felt that was her feminine essence, to just be in the garden and, you know, to bring in these beautiful things from the garden and cook them and make this beautiful meal for her family, and just be really loving and supportive and see how much her husband is doing for the family. And I was just so touched, you know. She's one of those rare instances where, you know, she's able to actually have this beautiful family life, you know,
mm.
despite going through unbelievable trauma in her. But she's managed that. Like, it's just, yeah, it's
It's
really
like the
amazing. And then,
cherry on the cake.
yeah, but
If the cake is
that
made
she
of
had created
trauma, but
that.
she got the cherry on the top. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
That she had created that, even though internally there was so much going on, she had still created that stability for herself.
Mm,
And now she's able to really appreciate it, because she's able to really connect in, you know, with that essence of who she is. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's true. It's very, very true. Yeah, it's very true. But you know, a lot of us do have to um, struggle, you know, a struggle of trying to maintain
mm,
ourselves and having to fight, and, you know, for our own, you know, basic needs. And yeah, it's important that doesn't harden the heart, that, you know, you're connecting that with divinity, that it's not coming from a place of fear
mm.
and lack and poverty, that it's coming from a place of high worth
Yeah, because
and trust.
ultimately the lower fear-based trauma is going to create a very
Hard
closed
heart.
off, yeah, hard, but not in a healthy way, not in like a thick skin where you aren't taking in the opinions of others too much, but like hard in the
Right.
sense of you cannot show love ever again, or like compassion, or like that softness that is inherently
Yeah.
within a woman's heart, you know. And yeah, again, that's the thing that men actually need at the end of the day. Without women, this world will be very cold and hard, because men will forget to be soft. Ultimately, we will just become very driven, competitive, because that's the world of a man. It's a very competitive space. And you know,
Interesting.
without that, without the opposing energy, that opposite energy of women, that softness, we forget to be soft. We forget to be like, oh my God. Like, you probably haven't experienced this, maybe you have, but I often, my group of friends has oftentimes just been males, you know, like when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And as soon as someone's girlfriend comes in, everybody is like chilled out, you know? Like before that,
Interesting.
we're giving each other hard times, and sometimes we get very intense and we're like very like we'll bash each other's head. But as soon as there's a feminine energy in the space, everyone's a bit more like, oh, you know, I can chill a little bit, you know?
Maybe a bit more respectful.
Be a bit more
Don't want
respectful. Yeah,
yeah.
it's softer towards each other, you know?
Sure. Yeah,
Not
no,
that
this
we
is
would
a
ever
beautiful
like
point.
be really mean to each other, but sometimes, you know, you get a bit intense with each other sometimes, you know? And
No,
having
thank you
that,
for sharing that.
yeah, and
Yeah, that's
having
really
just that
interesting.
one influence around, it's just like, oh, okay, cool, you
Wow.
know?
That's
And
fascinating. Yeah, I never
oftentimes the
thought about
woman
it.
would give a perspective that none of us has ever thought about. And we're all like, wow, that's cool. You know?
That's fascinating. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. That's beautiful. I
Yeah.
really love your perspective. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so funny enough, without me actually having asked all the questions that I sent to you in Instagram, we've pretty much covered all the questions, which is really great.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to maybe share something to bring in like a conclusion to what we were saying, maybe something a bit more about your practice, and then yeah, we can slowly just conclude and yeah.
I'm not sure how I would conclude that. I think it's just, yeah, find a way to, connect with yourself, find a practice that connects you with yourself, that connects you with somehow trying to master your emotional world. And yeah, finding something that where you feel connected with something higher, at least your higher self, and somehow bringing that into your world. I think that's really, yeah, how I could summarize
And
it.
also like not denying the importance of having the support of really healthy women, or at least women who are trying to become healthy, because that can
Yeah,
oftentimes project you and push you even further down your own growth development path. And just having
that
that support and that
association.
association around. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think it's challenging, particularly to begin with, because that element of trust is not there, or it's really hard. That's what I notice. Even when clients sign up, there will be this, this avoidance. I still have it within me, within my own heart as well. And so, yeah, it just really takes time. So that's why I'm thinking educate yourself first as much as you can. And yes, but ultimately association is 100% the best. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
But obviously you still have to maintain a sort of sense of individuality within the association, because otherwise, again, the association can push you down a path, like you were saying, that's inauthentic to who you are.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
become inauthentic if you're just relying on the other people to dictate how you move forward. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
true. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, yeah, it's this fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being able to
Right.
use those tools and connect in with them. And yeah, it's challenging. And I don't know, just lately, I think it's just moving here as well, a lot of that trust has come up because nothing's familiar anymore.
You
So
have to
yeah,
rely more on the other people who know a bit more and are a bit more well versed with where you are. And
yeah, I guess that's true, but it's just, yeah, I think your internal, barometer's kind of a little off, I guess, you have to really connect in and yeah, like you're saying, tune back in with yourself. I was actually agreeing with you,
mm,
like you're having, tuning back in with yourself and what's right for you. So yeah, it's just a fine balance, isn't it? A
like everything.
constant
Even in life,
true.
like when things are going really well, you may have negative things happening at the same time, or perceiving or seemingly negative things, because it's good to have a balance. It's really healthy to have that positive, negative balance in your life. And because it keeps us humble at the end of the day, you know,
Definitely.
it
Yeah,
reminds us
definitely.
of the purpose of life and the purpose of who we are, and it really connects us into the sincere part of ourselves, which is what I appreciate about life, at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Sometimes, yeah, not so much. Sometimes when it gets challenging, not so much.
In
But
retrospect,
absolutely,
though, right?
in retrospect,
Yeah.
definitely. When you're in
Yeah.
it, it's just like, oh, this is. Oh. But yeah, absolutely. In retrospect, and sometimes during,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Definitely, it's beautiful.
So thank you. I really appreciate this time that you took to spend with me and also with us, all the viewers on this channel. And yeah, I pray that your coaching business goes really, really well. And I also pray that your spiritual life progresses smoothly. And yeah, may Krishna the Divine bless you with whatever he feels that he needs to bless you with. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you, Peru. That's really kind. And I'm very, very grateful to have your association and this connection. Interviews are always an interesting avenue to go down. And I just love conscious connection and, you know, the intellectual stimulation, and just to see where it all goes. It's always really fascinating. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I also pray you're reaching out to so many wonderful people and connecting them with all of this knowledge and inspiration, and praying that your your healing business goes well, and maybe you'll become a coach as well. I think you already are.
Yeah, it's in the works, but before it happens, I don't like to speak about it. So it's there, but
Yes.
yeah.
Chanika Pandit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and just you know, if you talk about something before it happens, sometimes people tend to put negativity onto it, you know, because of
That's
their
what
own.
Chanika Pandit says.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
It's
okay, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's like that's one of his rules that he lives by. You shouldn't share anything until it's actually
Till it's
happened,
happening.
because
Yeah.
people's influence can be put into that and impact the outcome. So I love it. I love it. Yes, I try and do that as well.
Yes, it's good to remember. It's something I learned the hard way, but now I remember every time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
right. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. But thank you so much.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
yeah, I'm sure you'll be a wonderful coach. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you. I
association.
appreciate it. It takes one to know one, as they say. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Beautiful.